Hey everybody, it's Ron, and I want to tell you a story about business and how that story changed everything. It is the time of the pharaohs. You stand in the shadow of a temple wall in Egypt. Workers are lifting a newly carved slab into place. The decree is important enough that it has been copied onto stone and distributed across the kingdom. This is one of nearly 30 such stones, sent out to temples up and down the Nile so that no city, no priesthood, no provincial office can claim ignorance of what the crown has decided. The young king has been honored. The priests have approved it, and the government wants everyone to know. The inscription has been carefully carved in 3 different scripts. One for the priest, one for the administrators and merchants, one for the rulers in the wider Greek-speaking world that now governs Egypt. You are an educated man, a successful man, someone with influence. You read the Demotic language easily. It's the script of contracts and taxes and the daily business of running a province, and you can make your way through enough Greek to follow the court's correspondence. And yet, as you watch the slab being raised, the topmost band of writing means nothing to you. It's hieroglyphics, the sacred script, reserved for priests trained from childhood to read it. You trust that it says the same thing as the 2 bands beneath it, but you have no way to prove it. 2,000 years later, nobody will be able to read any of it. The words will survive, the meaning won't. So how do you lose an entire language, not through some single catastrophe, but slowly as the last people who could read it simply die without passing it on? How do you lose the working records of a civilization, the contracts, the decrees, the everyday business of an empire, and not even realize for over 1,000 years that the loss has happened? And how can a forgotten slab, pulled from a crumbling fort wall on July 15, 1799, by a French lieutenant who had no idea what he'd found, end up being called the Rosetta Stone and become the key that reopened every locked door behind it? From Business Basics, I'm Ron Trucks, and this is Business History, the daily podcast where we explain the stories that changed business forever. Every date on the calendar has a story where business reshaped the world. Today, July 15th, that story takes us to 1799, the rock that unlocked a civilization. The decree honoring King Ptolemy wasn't meant to be rare. It was meant to be everywhere. When a council of priests gathered at Memphis, Egypt, in 196 BCE to confirm the young king's divine right to rule, they were solving a political problem first and a religious one second. Because Ptolemy V was Macedonian, not Egyptian, and his claim to the throne needed more than a coronation to hold. So the priest ordered the decree carved onto stone slabs and distributed to temples across the kingdom, nearly 30 copies in all, each one cut in 3 scripts so that no single audience could later claim they hadn't understood what the crown had decided. That redundancy worked exactly as designed for centuries, until the people who could translate between the 3 layers started disappearing. Hieroglyphics required a lifetime of priestly training, and as Egypt's temples lost funding and authority under Roman rule, fewer priests were trained, fewer students enrolled, and the script that once governed religious life simply ran out of readers. The last known hieroglyphic inscription was carved at the Temple of Philae in Egypt in 394 CE. After that, the temples closed. The trained priests died out without successors, and the writing stayed exactly where it had always been, carved permanently into monuments across Egypt, while the meaning quietly walked out the door with the last man who understood it. 1,300 years later, a French engineer named Pierre-François Bouchard was overseeing the demolition of a wall at Fort Julien near the Egyptian port town of Rosetta, part of Napoleon's campaign to disrupt British trade routes to India. When his men uncovered a dark, broken slab carved with 3 unfamiliar bands of writing, Bouchard's training at the École Polytechnique, a leading French engineering school, told him this wasn't ordinary rubble. He flagged it immediately, and that single decision was the only reason the stone didn't end up as fill for the next wall. Recognizing the slab mattered and actually reading it turned out to be 2 entirely different problems, and the gap between them would take more than 20 years to close. The stone went to Cairo, Egypt, where French scholars copied it by pressing paper and ink directly onto the surface, treating the slab itself as a printing block so the text could travel without the stone ever leaving the room. The Greek portion translated quickly, since Greek was the one script European scholars could still read fluently, and it confirmed exactly what Bouchard had suspected. All 3 texts carried the same decree. That confirmation didn't unlock hieroglyphics. It proved the key existed somewhere inside writing that nobody could yet interpret, which made the stone valuable and useless in the same breath. Napoleon's campaign collapsed by 1801, and under the terms of the surrender, French forces handed the stone to British and Ottoman forces rather than risk losing it to looting or destruction. It shipped to England, arrived in London in February 1802, and went on permanent display at the British Museum, where it remains today. Possession of the stone, though, didn't translate into a head start on decoding it. Researchers worked from printed copies almost as often as from the object itself. What followed was 2 decades of rival scholars chasing the same answer from opposite directions. English physician and physicist Thomas Young made early progress identifying phonetic elements buried inside the Demotic script, treating hieroglyphics as a puzzle with some alphabetic pieces mixed in. French scholar Jean-François Champollion took a more radical position, arguing that hieroglyphics weren't a single consistent system at all, but a blend of phonetic, alphabetic, and symbolic elements working together. He announced his breakthrough in Paris, France in September 1822, in front of an audience that included Young, his own rival, sitting in the room while 2 decades of competition resolved in real time. What Champollion actually unlocked wasn't a language. It was an economy's paperwork, and that distinction matters more than linguistics. Once hieroglyphics could be read again, scholars gained access to an entire civilization's working records: tax rolls, property disputes, trade agreements, temple accounts spanning thousands of years. None of it had been destroyed. All of it had simply gone unreadable, sitting exactly where it had always been, waiting for someone who could make sense of it again. That last point is worth sitting with for a business audience, because the mechanism isn't unique to ancient Egypt. Every organization builds its own version of the same layered multi-audience record-keeping the Ptolemaic government relied on: formal language for regulators, working language for staff, simplified language for customers. Redundancy feels like protection as long as the people who can translate between those layers are still around. It stops being protection the moment they leave and nobody replaces them. because the information itself doesn't disappear. It just becomes Bouchard's slab, fully intact and completely unreadable until somebody with the right training happens to notice it. The bureaucrat who watched that decree get raised in 196 BCE trusted that all three scripts said the same thing without ever being able to confirm it himself. 2,000 years later, Champollion's work proved him right, and an academic field exists today because one government's instinct towards redundant communication happened to leave behind a key. The stone sits in the British Museum in London, England, the most visited object in its collection, and whether it belongs there is a debate for historians and diplomats, not this episode. What belongs here is simpler. Somewhere in your organization's records, and language only a handful of departed employees ever fully understood, there is very likely a version of the same problem. The information isn't gone, it's just waiting for someone to recognize what they're looking at. I'm Ron Trucks, and this is Business History, the podcast that finds the turning points behind the headlines. To hear more stories like this, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. And if you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to subscribe and leave a quick review. It helps more people find the story behind the business. And if you want to actually understand business better without the fluff or the buzzwords or the MBA language, start by visiting us at businessdailypodcast.com.